Good morning guys, welcome back to Wednesday's video here at Barham Engines. Right guys, first job of today, a little bit of a change from the Cosworths. I did notice a couple of comments actually saying even the Cosworth guys are going to be bored of these Cosworths in a minute, which is fair enough. That's all I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. So just going to have a little bit of a change. I'm going straight on today to this 1275 engine. So the good thing about this, we've got to build it up, but the customer, Gary is very meticulous. This head wasn't on the engine before. He's bought this head, and as you can see, he's kept it in absolutely immaculate condition. I think he's had it for over a year. The crank has supposedly been ground. Now, this was all done by Hamlin's, all this machining, before Gary had seen us. I'm not sure what the situation was with Hamlin's. I think he said that he knew the owners before, but now it's all changed hands. Anyway, it's here. He wants it all checked thoroughly. Again, because he's watched our videos, he sees the depths we go into with measuring the rod housings and all that, and he's took confidence in us and wants us to build it up, which is great. The block has been bored and faced. The head he has bought, that's all been done. The crank has been ground, supposedly. It's got the sizes on here. He's bought these sumping, but this is only for carriage purposes when it goes back. Obviously rods with new big end nuts and bolts. We've got new push rods, all new bits and bobs, all new gaskets in here, which is absolutely wonderful. So all I've got to do is just go through this lot and make sure that all the running clearances are correct. First thing I've done, if I just go to the book, John's on crank grinding day today. If you have a look here, 1275 Mini, 2.7805, and this block has been bored to plus 20, so we need to be setting the bore gauge at 2.8005. I've set the bore gauge, so here's one I prepared earlier, and what we're going to do is measure the bore. Now, as you all know, we like to run about half a thou over, so zero on the big and 2 on the little is 2.8005, and as you can see, measuring up and down the bore on each one, Hamlin's have bored that absolutely as I would. So that is great news. We don't have to ease this out at all. A lot of the time when people bring blocks in like this that have been done by someone else, we have to we normally ease it out to plus half a thou, because that's what we tend to run most things. But that's absolutely fine, all within limits and as I would do it. The block face is all good, so really we don't have to do anything to the block, apart from, you see the little chamfers on top of these threads here. This one hasn't got one, so I've just got to put a little chamfer on there, which is fine. And if you can see these little, what look like corrosion marks, now what these are is where once upon a time it's had an 11 bolt head stud head on it, like this one, where you've got the holes either side. Gary wants this one drilled for the 11 bolt conversion as opposed to the 9. So that's the one thing we're going to do, the only bit of machining we've got to do on that block. Next thing, I fitted the new nuts and studs into the conrod. See, Gary's he's very kindly sort of cleaned them right up, so we haven't got to do anything there. That's wonderful. The next thing I'm going to do is set the bore gauge and measure these housings, see what we've got. Then I think we are just going to get all this preservative grease off the crank, give it a measure, make sure that that is good. Obviously we'll be doing a dummy build into the block, make sure we've got the correct running clearances. We're going to be stripping out the cylinder head, just making sure everything's fine there, because obviously it's been stored for a while. Although it looks very clean, it could be a bit grubby in there. We could have a bit of debris on the seats, and we just want to check the guides. So next step guys, let's set the bore gauge and check these conrods. Right guys, the normally aspirated Cosworth. So I said to you in a previous video, or whether it was the last video, about having the correct running clearance. John has ground the crank now, which is down there. He's ground it on top limit, and I have just nipped down a mains cap, and we have ended up with 2.3 thou of running clearance, which is absolutely perfect. Right guys, I've had people ask me, how much is it to have a V8 crank assembly balanced and what is involved? So We've got a V8 crank assembly here to be balanced. Now I spoke to the gentleman this morning, and the first issue he's got is he's got a good set of pistons been put onto the rods, but they are not circlips, they are a press fit, which means you have to heat the rod up, and you've seen me do it before, and put it all together before it all goes off. Now the problem is with this is removing the pins out of the pistons without damaging the pistons. Now we've got a couple of jigs that we use to press, sort of sit the piston on and press against it, but you do run the risk of closing up the piston and buggering it up. So obviously to balance the conrods and pistons you need to separate them, because you do the rod end for end. There's no point doing it as a whole unit, because it can make a big difference. If you've got, say, 10 grams different on between the lightest to the heaviest piston, and the same on the big end, you could end up with about 20 grams out, although the whole thing weighs the same depending where you take the meat off. We've checked the crank for size and it's absolutely fine, so it just needs a polish. Fortunately he's got a new flywheel, otherwise we'd have had to reface the flywheel, which is about £70 plus VAT. To remove the pistons is probably half hour's work, and then to balance the rods end for end we charge £15. We charge £15 to size the big ends if we have to. This is each rod obviously plus the VAT, and another £15 to balance the piston, each piston. We obviously cannot balance the crank assemblies on the V8, so we send them up to a company called CTM Performance. If it's going from us, there's the carriage either way, which potentially could be about £90 each way, depending on how heavy it is and on what size pallet we have to use. A lot of the time it's about 50 quid. To balance the crank assembly is £350 plus the VAT, but you do run the risk on the V8s of there needed to be material added. Now the material that they add into it is very expensive. It's about £50 a go, so bear in mind the last one we had done was a Jensen Interceptor, and it ended up about 550 quid. So really, to do a V8 crank assembly, as in the rods, pistons, crank assembly, you could be potentially up to about 900, a grand plus the VAT. So that customer, I think he's in a very sort of low mile per year plodder. I've explained that to him. He was unaware of that. He thought it would probably end up 300-400 quid, but he's not going to have it done. So yeah, just bear it in mind, guys. If you are thinking of sending a V8 in here, it's a massive amount more than doing a straight 4, unfortunately. Right then, guys, I'm just measuring the conrod housings on the 1275 Mini. Now, first thing you've got to do is be a little bit careful. They did 2 sizes on the housing for the Minis. You've got here, you see you've got B for big ends. These are your thrust washers and they're your mains. This is on a Mini Cooper, and I think later on they beefed them up. So that is the smaller size, okay, 1.7705 to 1.771, which is sort of half a thou. But the one we're actually looking at is this one here, which is your big end, and the size is 1.8955 to 1.896. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the micrometer to 1.896, which is the bigger size, and see what we got. Right, so holding my first conrod in the vise here very, very lightly with the aluminium jaws. We're not putting any tension on that. I've set my gauge. So small hand will be on the 3, big hand on the 0, and that'll be on the big size. So 4.896 is the bigger one. So if we actually measure that, look, that is sort of on, it's within limits, but it's on the tighter side. So I'm going to go for the bigger side and take it to the 0, and then we know we are up on the bigger side. So I've measured all these rods, guys. They're all pretty much the same. A couple of them vary about half a thou. One of them is about half a thou tight in an area. So that's half a thou tighter than bottom limit. So we're just going to ease all these out to top limit. Then we know job's a good one. Right, guys. I bet you thought by the thumbnail and title, what on earth have they blew up again? Another warranty job. This fortunately is not one of our builds. So Back to the Cosworths. We have this one here in the 3 black crates. This is the block out of it. We've got all the bits actually. This is the crank, pistons, camshaft, cylinder head and conrods out of that engine. Now, this engine is out of a Mark 1 Escort, running, I think, around sort of 300 horsepower, meant to be. Now, the story is with this, poor owner, the engine was built by a company, rebuilt, and by the time it was in the car running, etc., they got a new ECU, whatever tuning company was going to be rolling road in it. By the time they got up and running, the company that rebuilt the engine had gone squit, apparently. They've dynoed it with a new ECU, not sure what ECU was on it. It started knocking on the dyno, so they've stripped it down, and this is what they found. And the owner has sent it to us. So, what have we found, guys? Obviously, it's done an end. That is the knock-in. Now, you've got to bear in mind, this is a brand new, fresh motor, supposedly. And it has definitely been done because, obviously, just the sort of wear, apart from the knackered bit, the general wear of it. So what I've done is I've measured all the decent bits that I can, and what have I come up with? So if we start with the conrods, it's the usual story. Obviously, that's the rod that spun the bearing. That's knackered. These 3 here, although the bearings are not looking great, the rods are still sort of as they were. So it's the usual story. They haven't sized the rods. 2 of the rods are probably bottom limit, so on the tighter side, but varying about half a thou, and even going about half a thou tight. Now this one here is up to, on that direction there, is 2 thou tight, so that's not going to be doing it any favours whatsoever. I've measured the crank, and although they're a bit scored, because obviously it's run sort of short of oil, that one, and that one actually all measure the same, and it's been ground 0.25 on the mains and the big ends. These big ends are running on bottom limit, so I would say with that one there, you're probably going to end up running about 1.5 thou running clearance on that one, you know, the one that's about 2 thou tight, which is obviously not ideal, but whatever that one is, I don't know now because it's nadgered. The mains are bottom limit, so I'd probably say there's about 2.5 thou running clearance on that, because the housings measure okay in the block, so that's not an issue. Right, next thing, the camshafts, you can see that they're very, very scored. So this thing is obviously, because it's done an end, it's run short of oil. The housings in the cylinder head are a little bit sort of scory, but not disastrous. I've measured them, they measure fine. But the camshafts are down about 5 to 10 thou on a couple of the journals, so they're scrap. But the head I do think that we can do something with, that'll be all right. The pistons, obviously that is the one that's out of number 2, because that has been hitting the head either side. But looking at these, they're 0.5 pistons, it has been bored, but all of them look like they've been hitting the head to me. You see that? And they haven't even had the ends go. So I suspect that they've decked the block good and proper. They haven't topped the pistons, because we normally run 12 thou protrusion, and they're probably running about 30 thou protrusion on those, which gives you no leeway for rock, etc., or expansion. And it's going to be more and more difficult to map on that. So this one here, you can see, it's been detting on the side. The crowns are all distorted where this one's got hot. I've measured the bores. It's been bored to 0.5, and they all look fine. There's no wear lip because obviously it's brand new. But when I've measured them, you can see it's very glazy. So it's, you know, it looks like it's been running a little bit rich to me. It shouldn't be that glazy, but these are about 5 thou oval now. They're all over the place, so they're going to have to go out again. But the last Cosworth that we had like that, with pistons that had gone all deformed like that, was Joe Oates's when he had it mapped, and it was running too much ignition really. But I'm not saying that that's what it is. It's just that that was the last one we had, went all a bit funky like that, and it is consistent along all the bores. So that one's got to be bored. It doesn't look like it's been blowing a head gasket. And the head face looks just the same. So, yeah, very unlucky for the owner. The crank's unsalvageable. It's bent over 20 thou, so you're going to have new I said to him, you may as well have new rods, a new crankshaft. I've got to obviously double check the cylinder head when I get 2 new cams, make sure that the housings are all right. But yeah, absolute disaster. Whether it's a tolerance issue or it's not quite right on the map, I don't know. That's something he's going to have to check. But yeah, it just goes to show, guys, just another example of one that probably hasn't been done 100% right. On the bores that I have measured, none of them are really on the slacker side. They all seem to be below size, so I don't even know whether it's been running the right clearance on the pistons. But obviously it is crucial that you get the piston to head the squish right, basically. But yeah, it's just standard stuff for what we see with these Cosies. So I have spoke to the customer. I'm going to be sending him a sort of estimate on the bits and doing the work. But yeah, very unfortunate for him. And I said, obviously, just double check, make sure when the engine's built, make sure it's mapped right. Not that it isn't, but it's just giving symptoms that maybe, I don't know. Well, there we go, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think about that Cosworth engine. But thanks ever so much for watching. And until Friday's video, have a great evening. Cheers, guys.